Welcome to another episode of Bringing Down the Grindhouse, a podcast where we discuss horror in media. And today we're going to be talking about Midsommar.
Nice.
How's it going, John?
My anxiety is through the fucking roof because of that movie.
Yes.
My neck was hurting while I was in there. But before we get to any of that, how you doing, Eddie?
I'm good. I'm just trying to get over the whole movie entirely. I learned don't ever go backpacking in Sweden now, apparently.
Nope. And today we have a special guest. We have Justine with us.
Hi there, I'm Justine.
And she's going to be joining us for this discussion of this film.
So, we just went to go see that movie today. We went to go see Midsommar today.
Yeah.
It
just a few hours ago.
Yeah, it just released, what was it, Thursday?
Wednesday.
It released Wednesday. So, yeah. And so we decided that we were going to do, for the first time on this podcast, we actually all went to go see a movie in a theater together.
Made notes.
And actually took notes during the movie. We looked like a bunch of nerds walking out. Everyone's like, who are these? Why?
Pocket protectors.
Yeah, I know, right? Nerds. So, but we're going to definitely discuss it. And it was definitely a shocking and very intense film.
It was really unsettling. Is like the main thing I felt from it. But we should take it like a piece at a time. So let's go to the very beginning. Where does it start?
Wintertime. So it's like it opens up like a storybook. That's how I felt like the movie starts.
The first thing you see is like a mural that kind of gives you an idea of what the story is about, but it doesn't give you too much after that.
If I had a picture of it in front of me, I could probably, because I didn't get one afterwards, but I could probably pick it apart and then compare it to the movie and then see all of their entire ritual playing out and everything.
I would guess they had, that whole story there. They also had a story later in the movie that had a lot of connections to the actual narrative that plays out. Mm-hmm. The one that's like supposed to be a love potion. Yeah.
A lot of the a heavy focus on like runic magic and things like that, and like very pagan and I want to say like naturalistic in a way. Well, naturalistic might also be like the incorrect term for what I'm referring to. I feel like, and then there's because paganism, to my understanding, has always been anything that's non-Christian. Basically, stuff that's like doesn't relate to the Abrahamic religions in any way. So non-Christian's really specific, but anything that doesn't relate to those in particular. So yeah, no, it definitely follows like some pagan religions and whatnot, and some like ideas like that. Though I don't know if any of us, Justine probably does, knows a bit more. Yeah, she knows a bit more about it than the rest of us do. So some of the references we probably missed and whatnot.
I certainly wouldn't call myself an expert on paganism, but I have dabbled a little in spellcraft myself and studied paganism and Wiccanism, so I know a little bit, but I would not call myself an expert on the subject. Little disclaimer.
Was there anything you guys noticed at the beginning that was like foreshadowing?
Murals and pictures on the walls. Like there's always these pictures of bears or like filleted flesh being spread out.
Yeah, I noticed when so in the beginning, her parents are pretty much killed, right? Like the sister kills them in addition to like offing herself.
Basically, what I got from the story is essentially they have their daughter, the sister of Danny, the main character of the story.
Yeah, I would say she's the main character.
She's pretty much the main character. Her sister is bipolar. That's something that they talk about. They basically say that she's having an episode and that she's doing it for attention and whatnot, which is quite a disservice to do to the mentally challenged, actually. But aside from the social aspect of that, they basically ignore her, and then she goes and she connects tubes to the exhaust pipes on the cars, leaves them running while the parents are sleeping, tapes them to her mouth, and basically like suffocates herself and her two parents in the beginning of the movie during winter, which sometimes is the symbology of death. So it was very interesting that they picked a snowy wintertime like backdrop for all of this to be happening during.
Right. It's like so in relation to the movie, it's like the beginning of her story cycle in relation to the seasons. And
I believe it's also sort of in relation to the solstice, which is what they're going to celebrate in the first place when they go to Sweden. I also noticed some medication that our character Danny is using is Ativan.
I didn't know what it was. I was going to ask if somebody knew.
Yeah, so I feel like some people might mistake it as like a painkiller, but Ativan is definitely like a anti-anxiety drug. It's definitely made to calm people down, is what the whole deal is. So she probably has like some anxiety present already before her sister's whole deal.
Danny does. She's
Yes,
the one
Danny
who's
does.
taking it? Okay,
Yeah, she's the one that's popping them.
Gotcha.
She does it like in the beginning where she calls her boyfriend. She calls Christian.
Yeah, honestly, so starting the film, he's a shit boyfriend. So like
Yep.
he's already like a dick, and so I was like, I was wondering
tell.
how it would connect to the story, and it makes sense once you get closer to the end. But like they spent a good amount of time kind of expressing to you how the relationship was kind of deteriorating, and then that kind of the motives for going. She ends up being like an innocent person in the whole event, which will make sense later when we bring it up. But people who are going all seem to have their specific motive. And then the Swedish guy, it seemed like it was almost his plan to like have her go, but I couldn't figure out how they could have like brought that.
Not just her, all of them.
Right.
Like he was definitely trying to get replacements for his community and get people from the outside involved.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. I mean, we don't even I wanted to discuss that.
I'm going to write it on the description.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely. I would just like to discuss spoilers for just one tiny moment. I think that
we're going to spoil the whole movie.
Oh yeah, no, we're totally going to spoil the entire movie for sure. Definitely. And I don't think that if you so be warned that everything is going to be spoiled from here on out basically because we're looking into it. And yeah, so see it before watching the podcast or listening to the podcast. Nobody watches podcasts.
So the Swedish guy, he makes a really good effort to make things sound like they're gonna be all right. That it's just your typical like folk festival where they dress up and have some fun, and they're like, yeah, this sounds good. But right from the get go, when they get there, they take drugs or mushrooms. I don't really know.
Yeah, they were eating mushrooms.
Yeah, so like they just start you off with a trip, which was weird because I felt like from that point on you couldn't trust what you were seeing. Like it was all like a uncertain narrator.
Yeah, exactly. Very like unreliable narrators for sure.
That's it. That's the term I was looking for. It was unreliable narration from what you were seeing visually. And then they mess with all the visuals later on in the film where you start to see like what it looks like to be on mushrooms and on like LSD or something.
And interpretation.
Everything's very fluid. Everything just feels like a wave pretty much.
What did do you guys think that they did that on purpose to kind of like alter the state of what you might be seeing? Like you accept it more?
Yeah, altering the reality of another person is also a fear I think some people have. A lot of people have very fearful of psychedelics a lot of the time because they are afraid of not being in control of their own. So I feel like that could have been an aspect of fear it was trying to explore, not being in control of your own self, because Danny doesn't have a very good trip.
No, she has multiple moments where like she sees different things, like when she goes into the outhouse and like the light flashes, and I believe she sees herself like taped up with like tape over her mouth, and then she like runs out, but she didn't actually go in there. She thinks people are laughing at her too, like there's all sorts of weird stuff, and then she just wakes up in the field and they're like, you've been here for like 6 hours.
Also, it's like someone's perspective of reality as well.
It was like showing her fears, like what she was experiencing the most, her anxiety, and like even just like kind of meshing with the ground kind of freaks her out. Like her hand starts growing grass, and she doesn't know how to handle it.
Starts becoming part of the earth.
And it's sort of like there's a little bit of symbolism there that plays on in later in the movie. There was a really cool transition that I want to talk about in the very beginning that I'm sure that you and I both want to talk about. And one of the coolest and probably the best transition in the movie is definitely the one where I think she's going to the bathroom, I believe, and she ends up in the bathroom, and then it like as soon as she opens and closes the door, she's in a plane bathroom, so she's on the plane on her way to Sweden.
That was such a clever transition to bring you to their trip. So instead of having to show an airport and show them getting packed and all of that, that's the transition you get, and that's all you needed.
Yeah, it's basically like I want to say it's like a triggered emotion she gets from the conversation with the Swedish guy whose name I cannot remember.
I couldn't figure that moment out either, though.
Yeah.
He was being really like genuinely nice.
But I mean, just the fact that he brought it up because it just happened in the winter, so we're near summer now. So it's like that was only like maybe like 6 months ago for her, something like that.
Just so we can stop calling him Swedish guy. His name's Pella.
Oh, name's Pella.
Yeah,
All right,
Pella.
cool. All right, so Pella. So Pella is definitely being really nice and trying to be understanding, but I think that it just triggers her into that trauma again. So she's like reliving it, and then she goes to the bathroom to like deal with it, and then it shows when she's on the plane. It shows that she's still carrying that grief with her, even on the plane ride.
I was curious about Pella when he describes that he lost his parents too, but like had this family. It almost makes you wonder if he got brought there as a child and then his parents were a part of this ritual.
They burned alive in a fire.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like they were a part of the ritual and then he got left there as a kid and then just joined them. Yeah. Or maybe he was the one to choose one of his parents to go into the house. So that was interesting that he brought it up. And it doesn't mean anything until after you've watched it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it actually. And then at the end, I wonder if they betrayed like the will of the group, or if they willfully sacrificed themselves earlier and he just doesn't remember the rest of it.
But don't they do this ritual every 90 years? Or is that just him bluffing?
Well, I mean, no, it could have happened like when they were like 60 years old or something like that. And then it could be like, 20. He's only like maybe his mid 20s, maybe early 30s, maybe.
I also suspected that some of the people there may be living an extra extended long life. Not every single person seems to be like going through all the ritual, but that was just like a suspicion from me. And the only reason I thought that was because of they're talking about like their cycle of rebirth and things like that, so they may have just like found a way to keep themselves young that way. So, but I could be wrong. It could be like a fake theory.
Yeah, I feel like that it plays more in with the cyclical nature of the whole thing. Like it definitely is like even their own like pagan rituals that they do and everything, and their feasts and whatnot. All of them seem to center around like two individuals who sort of lead them and like guide them in some way, and so they like go through this cycle of repicking the new one every so many years. So it's the Flower Girl, I think is what they called her. Was it Flower?
The May Queen.
The May Queen. Thank you. Yes, there. It was the May Queen.
So if you want to be Miss America or Prom Queen, you better be the May Queen.
Yep, that's the best queen to be. Clearly.
I like that their process for choosing the May Queen was really just like a test of stamina.
Yeah,
to see how long you could dance for.
Who could dance all fucked up the longest. I loved all of the girls just like bumping into each other and just falling out of the whole thing.
But Danny also got lucky too. Like I think they purposefully like set it up so she would like win that dance in a way.
I felt like she actually won that, like honestly,
like legitimately.
Yeah, I feel like it was a real thing, and it just sort of fell into that way.
She wasn't showing like really any signs of fatigue either. Like she was like all into it, didn't really care.
I think more than it being like a physical stamina thing, it was also about mental stamina. Considering everybody had taken a psychedelic beforehand, and everyone whatever they're feeling is a lot more enhanced. But I think there was a moment when they were dancing, it was down to like the final few people, and there's a moment where her vision becomes blurred. And then you see like the image of herself, and then everything kind of blurs away. I feel like that was sort of her mind like assimilating almost to like the group mentality, which is I think what they were going for.
That's a really good interpretation of that, because it's really hard for me to interpret stuff like that on film, like with layering of pictures over things. But I think that's a really good interpretation for this film, definitely.
That is really good and holds a lot of weight, because they eventually at some point she can understand Swedish and start speaking with the girl.
Yes, that is the thing. When she gets there, she throws some Swedish down a little bit.
So she is obviously becoming part of the community. She's becoming one with them.
And I think it kind of had to be her, because she was pretty much detached from her old life. You know, her parents and her sister had died. She had a withering relationship with her boyfriend. And I feel like that's kind of what was his name? Pell? What he saw in her, why he kind of chose her, essentially.
Thinking that she'll make a good fit. She can be easily indoctrinated into our group, essentially. They do a lot of it. It's a lot of smiles and a lot of smiling people that make you very unsettled in this movie.
Right. And so they get there, they get sort of settled in, they get like this intro where they talk with a few people, get shown their quarters, but then immediately goes into the ritual with the oldest people who are essentially they just kill themselves. They commit suicide by jumping off of a cliff.
Of a stone cliff.
Yeah.
What did you guys think about it being like a public spectacle? Like they all went to go witness this.
I'm kind of okay with it. I work with old people. So when you see the hardships that elders go through sometimes in the latter years of their life, it's a lot of suffering, and it's really hard for them and everyone else around them. So it makes a lot of sense why they would conduct a ritual like this and have it's a really like old school way of looking at things. Right, it's like pre-civilization almost, like, you know, the tribe must survive sort of ideas, you know what I mean? We must like cut the weak parts off. And so I think that's kind of where they're coming from very traditional.
Yeah. Also, it's like everyone has a different reaction towards them falling to their deaths. Like the British couple are just like shocked and mortified pretty much, and Christian is like vomiting, and Danny is just like not fazed by it pretty much. She's more of in awe of it, I would say.
I thought she got scared. Didn't she like grab Christian?
Yeah,
and, like...
she definitely was not interested in that. I feel like she got a little freaked out by it. She started having visions of her own two parents, and then like seeing herself on that rock with the two of them.
It was her sister, actually.
It was her sister. Yeah. Her sister and the two and the her parents were at the bottom of the rock.
What do you think about the runes at the top that they like cut their hands and put blood on?
Those are Ruthark runes that they mention in the film, and Ruthark runes are like really old. Like I want to say like they're Nordic in origin. Of course, I couldn't tell you the exact history, but they're like the Nordic alphabet basically. So all of those letters have different symbolism to them and whatnot. And I've done a little bit of reading onto totemic. Totemic like pagan beliefs and whatnot, and what animals represent, but I haven't done too much on the runes and whatnot, which made some of the animal choices in this movie very interesting to me a little bit. Like
they had a bear and a cow.
Yeah, the bear is an interesting one, but I'll get to that later. One thing I did want to talk about is like neither of the two people that jump off, they have very different deaths.
Yes, they do. They really do. They had different reactions to everything. Like the woman did not seem like she wanted to go through with everything.
Basically the elder woman like went through the process, and she had a very quick like done sort of death. There was no real like struggle for her. She lands like right like skull to stone and just smashes her face in and then dies. Whereas he, on the other hand, the other elder man that jumps off. Also, like he goes down feet first and then like breaks his legs at the bottom, and then he's like sitting there suffering and whatnot. And when the elderly woman dies and it's like a quick death, like all of them, like the whole crowd like has like a sense of relief over them almost. They're just like, oh good, yay! They're kind of cheering like, yay, she's passed on, it's great. And then when he falls down and he's sitting there in pain because both his legs, he's still alive and whatnot, they all start screaming in agony, almost as if they're trying to share that agony with another member of their tribe there. And it's a very interesting viewpoint that I never like thought of in like a community setting before. And it's very like scary also, because you're just like, wow, these people are all like so like, you almost feel like you're detached from this.
Yeah, I felt through the whole story you were kind of just detached from a lot of it. There's some moments with the camera work where it kind of brings you into what you're doing by doing the slow zoom. But other than that, you kind of felt like you were watching the entire thing. Mm-hmm. And it gave me the sense that you were watching like a play. And some things like very theatrical for other elements. And especially with that intro. Structure. Yes, it did. It had like that. You could tell when like one of the acts ended and when you can move on to the new one and when the new piece started. I think the first act kind of ended with their deaths, with the deaths of the two elders. And that's when it kind of brings in like, well, what's really happening in this village where they're living at.
I think the third act also starts when they do the dance or the last feast in the movie. Because that takes a while.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so after she wins?
Yeah. I think that's when the third act sort of brings the conclusion to the whole movie.
So these two elders basically sacrifice themselves to save themselves of the suffering of getting old.
Yeah.
Well, not only save themselves, but also essentially benefit the rest of the tribe.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because then they don't have to witness this suffering anymore or have to care for them.
Right.
Yeah, it's less. Yeah, exactly. So, and it's a very logical way of doing things. Super controversial though, as is displayed by all the characters' reactions. After that, however, we have the British couple. They decide to hightail it and leave. They just say, "We're getting out of here."
Which they never made it.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, they both the guy disappears first, and then his girlfriend is looking around for him.
Fiance.
her name's fiance.
No, her
You said fiance. I thought I heard fiance. I was like, that's a crazy name for a person. Anyway, like almost like
yes, this is the Mysticles.
This is Mysticles.
or Britta.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then he disappears. Girlfriend is wondering where he has gone, and then they, of course, lie to her and say, "Oh yeah, he just got another bus."
They did a really good job of separating all of the people that got there one way or another to kind of like really go into their selfish motives for why they were there. And it's really important too that it's noted that Danny arrives there with no motive. She goes there. She isn't looking to like gain anything out of it. She's kind of just like wrangled into it and just was trying to find a way to sort of feel better about her grief. And so in a way, she's kind of like the perfect fit for like fitting into everyone else and kind of assimilating the way she does. And so that's interesting. Everyone else who had a selfish motive is punished in some way or another.
Yep. Very true.
Also, like religion in real life, like prey on people's grief in a way.
Well, I mean, they did share all of their emotions. That was like one of the main things that I noticed was any emotion one of the people was feeling, usually everyone else was.
They're all like cheering or just
or grieving. Even like at the end when everyone is burning, they're like acting like they're getting burned as well.
Yeah, oh, that's so true.
That was sort of like interesting to watch because they're both like cheering, but they're also like in pain and agony from this whole situation.
Yeah, oh god, that dichotomy is just weird. Like those two sides. Oh my gosh. So much to unpack with this film.
I say it's a better Wicker Man movie.
You don't want to watch. You don't want to watch Nicolas Cage get burned in a cage with all the bees.
How'd it get burned? How'd it get burned? How'd it get burned?
The other thing, there's a lot of foreshadowing that goes on in this movie. A whole bunch of it. So I liked the Skin the Fool thing they did right in the very beginning. They're just like, what song are they playing? Oh, Skin the Fool. And I think we already knew who the fool in their group was.
Well, he immediately jumps up and is like, "Can I join?"
Yeah.
and he was like, that's when he was like, "Well, you're an American, so just force your way in there."
Oh my god. Oh, that's right. Oh my gosh. He also is he's the only guy vaping at the pagan party.
Yeah.
I wonder what this movie says about vapors, what they think about them.
Well, it definitely said something about Americans.
Yeah, definitely. Just being like rude to like other cultures,
he,
essentially.
Like literally pisses on the
ancestral tree
later.
Yep, and doesn't know
like
it.
where they put all the ashes for the burned bodies. Like that's
it's
crazy.
Like, so what?
Yeah, and then oh my gosh, and he's like, "So what? Are you hearing what he's saying?"
It's also like language barriers as well. Like these
what? That made me think of something. There was plenty of moments where we did not have translation, but then very specific moments where we had translation and we knew what they were saying. Like the intros to like certain ceremonial events, we got like an explanation, and they were almost always like very ominous. Like even the dance was like we're dancing in like gleeful life against like the dark one basically, and like it's like the dance itself was sort of making fun of whatever it is, like death essentially. Like, oh look, we're alive, we're dancing.
Yeah, whatever the evil thing is that they're talking about. And that was interesting. A bunch of the other things, like there was some other foreshadowing too. There was more like there's cloths that have the whole story. So there's the whole women coming of age tapestry that goes by that they pan over with the camera
in the beginning, like the first kind of like mural.
Yeah, the one that's like where it's just like
It was actually a description of a love spell.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Oh,
yeah.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense then. Yeah, so the interesting thing that I noticed is that we all noticed the pubes in the bread, but did anybody notice the blood in the cup?
Menstrual blood?
That was like the first
I know, that was the first thing I picked up on. I was like, that is a significantly...
His cup was the only one that was a different color on the entire table.
Yep, so she's been... There was a whole love spell going on with this.
I mean, you could argue that it actually worked.
Yeah, it did, technically, yeah.
Yeah, he eventually gives in and has sex with her and like... It just completely breaks from the relationship with Danny.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
Like the foreshadowing at the very beginning when Danny is asleep and before they go to the party, before she figures out they're all going to Sweden, there's a painting above her of a bear leaning down to her, and it's a little girl with a crown on. So that already was foreshadowing the ending of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they definitely had that symbology. And then in the living room, there was a picture of like almost a flayed man, kind of like running away.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's the filleted man in the chicken barn.
Yep, that's the thing. Yeah, he was. Yep, there's your flayed man. So they do all of these rituals as like a sacrifice of those who have wronged them. I would imagine to appease the greater good powers. I would imagine.
Well, I believe they worship a sun god.
That's what it seems like, or something along those lines.
Yeah, they just worship the earth, pretty much. Just even through the seasons, it's like all about life and cycle and birth and death.
A few other conflicts more arise in this film too, more so than with themselves and with the characters that show up that are outsiders and the cult itself. There is some conflict inside the group over the cult as well that I think is a really good thing to explore, because it causes some characters to get themselves killed, essentially. And it's kind of
right. The two guys who are essentially wanting to write their thesis on the people there, as well as the Midsommar festivities in other countries, especially European ones. And so I definitely think one guy, I can't remember his name, the one who goes into like the temple-ish area where they have all the written stuff.
Josh, there you go. It's Josh.
Josh goes in there when he wasn't supposed to take photos, and then gets killed by
Club. He gets hit with a hammer.
Who does he get killed by though?
It was one of the men that was sacrificed towards the end. The two living sacrifices.
Someone was wearing Mark's face. The fool.
That was actually Mark himself.
Oh, okay.
They had just put the skin back on him.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, he was wearing. Yeah, it was a guy wearing the face.
But there was another person who struck him in the back. I can't remember the name. I don't know if it was mentioned, but he was one of the tribe's people.
Yeah.
Who in turn sacrificed himself by sacrificing someone else.
Yep. So yeah, by killing, they would also be killed. Was the idea is that they basically, if any of the tribes people killed someone, then they are also guilty of badness. So they must sacrifice themselves because a life for a life.
I was really curious about the book that he was trying to get photos of. So like the way they described it was that the cult purposely makes children of incest who they believe are unclouded in their visions and like the way they interpret the world around them. And so they allow them to kind of create these songs in this book, which they then sort of interpret and then share with the rest of the cult. But it's specifically inbred children who are supposedly to them like they're oracles. Mm-hmm. But then you look on the walls and there are hundreds of thousands of these books, like all shelved on the wall. Mm-hmm. So it's like this is a crazy long tradition that they've been doing.
Yeah, it's I think it's like records of the tribe's experiences is what they are for basically, and it's just like the times that everyone experienced grief this day. We all experienced great happiness on Tuesday, but Wednesday a cow died and we all cried.
It was also made in a spiral form.
Oh shit!
The letters were going out from the center, and then they do the spiral again when they're dancing. And then there's another one when they are looking at, like in some of the camera work, when they're kind of like, when they're going there, it's flipped upside down. So you have the sky on the bottom and the road on the above. That was such a good shot.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. I gotta commemorate this movie for its cinematography and editing and also the diegetic music in the movie where the women are chanting. And that's sort of like the soundtrack to the movie pretty much.
As far as I know, there wasn't like any soundtrack music. It was just everything was there. Yeah, there was no score to it. It was just the chanting that you got from all the people there, and that was it. But it was constant. Like you almost had that chant going a good amount, and then it would quiet for a few moments.
Yeah, it was definitely immersive in that way too, because you always have like the sound of them just there in front of you, and then the tension always builds right when the music stops. Every time it just gets way scarier and just kind of uneasy every time because you think something's gonna happen.
What's the next main event that happens that's significant to the story?
From which point?
After the couple disappears, or after her boyfriend leaves,
True.
supposedly leaves, and then she goes and finds him.
So let's see. After her boyfriend leaves, I believe the conflict between Christian and Josh starts.
Yeah, Christian tells him that he's basically gonna like copy his whole idea and do his thesis on just that specific tribe that they went to. When Josh has been working on it for who knows how long, and is like, you can't just do that. But then when they take it to their friend, what is his name? Pella. he's like, well, I'll go ask the elders, and then he finds out that the elders agree as long as they both like share credit, and so they then like sort of have to work together. But that leads Josh to kind of want to get a leg up on him, which puts him in the temple like without anyone's permission, and that's pretty much how he gets killed.
Yep.
I also love the awkward situations in this movie where it's just like, you can't copy my homework because that's just a major faux pas. And then it's like, oh no, it's all good. You can definitely read our scripture, just don't take any of it home with you. And then it's just like, it's like the language barrier and how the group falls apart within itself, like both inside and out, is what I liked about this movie with these characters.
Yeah, all the time that they spend building up the backstories for everybody and how they're interacting with each other sets it up so that you kind of like, you do care about all of them in a way, at least to a point anyway. You're kind of like, okay.
Do you think in some way that they ended up saving Danny from a lot of stuff that may have happened if she had stayed in a relationship with Christian?
Yes and no, in my opinion, because this community or tribe is also capable of murder, that's what it's flat out doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I gotta say though, they did lay down some rules.
They did.
Yeah,
it wasn't like they were killing
society
randomly.
where they have their own laws for sure. Like it's a small, like their own utopia, but within a utopia, it will eventually fall. Kind of like in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, where you have this perfect world, but inside that perfect world, there is a disorder to it. Like there's a red herring.
Yeah, a lot of it feels like a lot of self-sacrifice to me for people that are just in the tribe itself or in the community themselves. So it's sort of like, I feel like they'd give her the option if she wanted to do that. You know what I mean? She has her freedom of choice within that community. They're not just going to up and kill her for no reason.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're not, and they don't seem to do that with anybody really in the tribe. They always they are volunteers.
They don't even like force them to like take a drink or smell or taste.
Nope.
And like food.
Nope.
Pretty much. It's all under their own volition.
Well, even when Danny wants to go find out what's going on in the cabin or wherever he goes, and he's having sex with that girl, they don't stop her. She's like, I recommend that you don't do that, but she still goes anyway.
Yeah, they'll still let her do it.
And then they like help her grieve afterwards too.
Mm-hmm. That was the craziest moment. That entire thing was just another callback to like the communal aspect that they feel. So like, because this girl is getting laid, like the entire tribe of women is like around her going like, yeah, we feel your stuff. Woo! Yeah. It's like so awesome. And then, grandma even gets in there and starts pushing a butt and starts like, come on, get into the tribe.
Well, it's a community that shares a lot with itself. They do not like withhold anything. Yeah, that's why they don't have their own private rooms or anything, like except for the woman who runs the community has her own house, but everyone else is just like has a bed, but they all share the same like space.
That's what sort of made me think that she might be one of those people that's just been there forever because she has her own place. And then like you go in and there's all sorts of runes on her walls. Which is like
the bear.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Foreshadowing what's going to happen to Christian at the end of the movie.
From my understanding, I believe that woman was the high priestess of the tribe, which is why she had special abilities and accommodations, basically.
Yeah, no, you are definitely right there.
Yeah, I love that the director said this was like Wizard of Oz for perverts.
Well, when they're first getting there and they're walking up to like where they live, there's golden flowers that lead their way all the way in.
Yellow Brick Road.
I just
the Yellow Brick Road. Yeah,
that so hard. Wow, that's
that
super
makes so
hilariously
now.
awesome.
And then when
the villagers are like the Munchkins or the
they're super excited, very happy to see them. And then when Christian goes to have sex with the girl, a flower girl comes out and lays petals down that leads to the building that he walks into. So a lot of symbology with the flowers and then them walking over it and things like that.
Well, we always have like flower girls leading to like a bride and groom, and like even I think royalty does that as well. Yeah, but I think after watching this movie, I think I really want to watch Hereditary next because I've never seen Hereditary, and This was supposed to be the director's first horror movie, not Hereditary.
Something random. What was up with the crying baby and then someone putting scissors under the pillow?
I'm still trying to rack my brain around that shot right there.
There was constantly a crying baby in the communal area that they were sleeping in, but then there's a short scene where the baby is crying and then somebody puts scissors underneath the pillow where the baby is sleeping, and I don't know if that means something.
I thought it was like a block or something. Were it scissors? Maybe I just didn't see it correctly.
It might have also been a rune, because I couldn't really see exactly what it was, but I do notice they had a thing with putting runes underneath.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if...
areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry for interrupting you. I feel like it was probably like a calming rune or something like that. Something to be like, you know what I mean? Because they're very like that. like casting spells and whatnot, but maybe
still crying.
Maybe a second viewing is what I need to see if there are scissors or not, because there's a lot in this movie, a lot of stuff that you can unpack in it for sure. Following the death of Josh because of the conflict with Christian and Josh.
I love that the guy I'm sitting next to in the movie theaters when the fool is going off to get lucky with that chick, and he says, I know he's not coming back. And then he says, at least it's not that black guy right there. And it's just like, then 10 minutes afterwards, it's like, you were saying?
What you were saying is that he's just like, oh, well, he's not coming back. That's how it goes.
I love that brother didn't die so immediately at first.
The next thing that happens is the competition, right? The dancing competition.
I believe so. Yeah, that's the next part of the film.
Yeah, and so she kind of gets brought into it because they separate her and Christian, and they're just like, "You're gonna go do separate things," and that's how Christian goes and talks with the lady, and then ends up going to the feast after she's won, or to the dance after he's talked to her. Then seems so disconnected from everybody else. He's not watching her. Barely realizes that she won. And then when she gets kind of like brought in for a picture and then kind of wrangled in another direction, she sees her mom.
Yeah, her mom
in the crowd. She like walks right in front of her, and I didn't know what to make of that.
Yeah, neither did I. It's just sort of like maybe more of that unrealistic narration as well.
Well, Danny loses her family, but she kind of regains a new family without her like probably realizing it.
Oh, yep, that's kind of what it is. Yeah, maybe it's like a symbology of her mom leaving, and that the old family is now gone, and this is her new one. That's a good take on that, Eddie. I like
yeah, because she's just like she's like slowly divorcing from her old life into a whole new one that Pella has bringing her into.
That's a lot of horror movies we've been talking about lately and stuff have been about like people changing themselves, and the outcome of the horror movie and like the dreadful awfulness is usually like has some outcome of change for the person that survives it.
A lot of horror has to deal with the person versus their environment, or essentially like fighting something. Mm-hmm. Most of horror is around like you dealing with something, and in most cases your emotions manifest as actual creatures.
Well, also, I feel like horror deals with life and death. Like, Frankenstein is a classic. Yes, go ahead.
No, finish it.
Okay, like, Frankenstein or any, like, zombie movie will deal with the whole cycle of life and death. And then with Midsommar, it's a little bit different where it's just, like, you go through the cycle of seasons, you go through the cycle of human life, the cycle of, like, animals, and just, it has a perfect, like, symbology of just, like, compacting into this movie, which I feel like you gotta watch a couple more times. This is a movie you need to like really be in a mood for to watch, because it's not like an easy sit down movie.
So I just want to kind of allude back to when you were talking about the dancing ritual, basically when they're around the maypole, and you also had talked about the spiral showing up constantly in the movie. There's actually a lot of symbolism that was related to pagan religions, and one of those is spirals and circles are symbols basically of life and death. It's the cycle of life essentially, and then also things happening in threes. So the whole cycle of life and this and that. Basically, like 3 is really symbolic. When they're dancing around the pole, they were in 3 rings, 2 rings going one direction, 1 ring going the other direction. And from what I'm familiar with ritualistic dance is that when you have a ring that's going to the right, it's symbolizing life essentially, but when it's going to the left, it's symbolizing death. So that is that comes up a lot throughout the movie is the cycle of life. Even with the first ritual, which was the two elderly people sacrificing themselves, if you remember the table that they were sitting at for the feast, how it was a diamond, and then it was a second diamond but was open-ended on the end. It was sort of essentially showing the points in life. Each triangle is of 3 points, and the 3 points can represent a lot of things. Essentially, what the triad represents is the divine feminine, which is the emotional aspect of life, the divine masculine, which is the logical aspect of life, and then divine child, which is assimilation of the both. And so that's kind of something that shows up throughout, like even with the baby crying. I believe that was sort of to allude to the child aspect of their life cycle. Yeah.
Fuck.
That's some good.
Yeah, fuck yeah. That's some good interpretation.
Very good analysis there. Definitely need that. Definitely need some educated voices on this. At least educated to a point. Self-educated. Educated.
Well, I mean, they make a reference to them having that duality of genders of man and woman with their clothes. He mentions that the clothes they wear is like unisex, basically, and that they're wearing it to bring in the sort of like I think he says hermaphrodite in his explanation, but it's really just like the duality of both of those genders that they're sort of respecting in this festival, and how each one is just as important.
Even the high priestess has to agree to who gets to couple together as well, who gets to go with who, and like for making further breeding.
It's not purely paternal. It's like decided by the wise woman and by the two parents of the child.
Oh yeah, in a weird way, it's
Arranged
matriarchal
marriage.
because she is the one who's currently in charge, and it didn't strike me that anyone else was really in charge besides her. She was kind of like running a few things and sort of would probably pass it to someone else once they got to like a certain age or they got a certain role. There's one guy who mentions that they all get their jobs based on traits that they show as children. And so there's definitely people who have just been raised up in this. They haven't experienced anything else, so to them it's very normal to be seeing all these events kind of unfold. And then all of the outsiders are the ones who freak out.
Yep.
And so they did a good job of making you freak out about something you've never seen before. And so as an audience member watching it, you're like getting freaked out with them.
And the people in the theater were getting pretty like the whole jumping off the cliff thing. People in the theater were getting freaked out by that. Like they were just like, whoa, and then I heard one dude go,
what was gonna happen too, but I didn't really like the theater that we were in when we saw this movie. I think there was too many like uncomfortable laughter, or just like people thought things were maybe unintentionally funny for some reason. I couldn't really get engrossed into the movie that way, where people were laughing that way, like this is a comedic movie, because I thought this was like very on your edge seat kind of like suspense thriller type movie, not like a straight up horror movie entirely.
What do you guys make of their very final event where they choose 9 people to put into that hut to burn, and that's like their sacrifices?
I feel like that's also the symbology of the ending of Christensen's and Danny's relationship, all up in smoke and flames. Pretty much, just like how sometimes relationships end. They end pretty disastrous.
Everybody who was put in that house is there because they have wronged the community in some way. They've introduced something that the community does not agree with, whether it is jealousy or whether it is just being like disrespectful, or whether it's being, they were very much like that. They were like, we don't really want values that do not correspond, that like disturb the balance here of what we've given. So the fool is sitting there smoking his Yule all day long, pissing on trees and trying to fuck all the whatever he can fuck. And they're just like, no, it's not what we're about here and whatnot. And so, you've got that aspect, and then you've got the, going into the house that you were told not to go to, and, like taking our history and going to spread it to the world, endangering. And the idea is you're endangering our community by doing that, I would imagine, is their motives behind that.
What about the couple from London? The British couple?
See, that's
I couldn't figure out anything wrong they had done. I couldn't figure out
what they did wrong, except for the only thing is like maybe freak out and want to leave and go like, tell the world about what they saw or something like that. Maybe the cult felt that if they were allowed to leave, they would spill the beans, and then their way of life would be disturbed. Maybe that's the only real, like, that's like the stretching motive I'm going with to logicalize everything.
I did also remember the short little bit when they're introducing to each other, and they're like, oh, how long have you guys been together? and one of the members of the cult is like, actually, we were dating before, and she's like, we went on like one date, and so he could have just been like, he could have just been wanting to get revenge, and like for the guy. And
he's the one that sacrificed himself too.
I'm pretty sure
it wasn't Pella; it was a different guy.
So I think he brought them. He brought them and was like, "Oh, I'm gonna bring these two because they wronged me. Because one, she didn't want to date me, and then the guy started dating her afterwards, and then they were like friends. So I figured that was probably the reason.
I could see that. I could totally see that.
Which would also make sense why he sacrificed himself in turn, because of his jealousy. It was basically like a wrong emotion to feel.
So it ties back into the, you have brought the wrongness into our cult now. You will suffer for it. Dig it. Honestly, I'm liking this movie the more that I'm analyzing it now. There's a lot of good, like, there's a lot of good intentional stuff that like well connects and like is really interwoven into the story.
It's multi-layered.
Yeah.
Well, even the building that they're getting burned in, it's a triangle. 3 points.
God damn it.
Yeah.
The threes, Justine, the threes.
Yeah. Notice 9 days, 9 sacrifices, 3 times 3. Coincidence? I think not.
Yeah. Fuck. 9 days, 9 sacrifices.
And they're not burning in a wicker man, but it could be as well.
Yeah. She sees her sister and the dad and the mom, 3.
Yeah.
Again.
The mother, the father, the child.
Oh, fuck. Fuck. All right, this movie just became extra good. So it's extra good.
I like
Damn.
it.
Do you think that Danny is happily assimilated into the group by the end?
Dude, that smile on her face, that was no, like, The Graduate smile. You know what I'm talking about at the end of The Graduate? We all know what I'm talking about? Okay, that was no The Graduate smile. She is in bliss right now.
When Dustin Hoffman is, like, with his, like, girlfriend and they're
wife
off.
Now. It's the wife at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then they have the fading smiles at the end, so you're like... Yeah.
Is this the future that we want?
Yeah, exactly. So to not tangent too much, but yeah, no, exactly. So like you can tell that she's pretty blissful about it. Like she's pretty much like, I have found a place of belonging now after losing everything.
I think she also feels like release. Like she's free from the trappings of her relationship and boyfriend that she's probably felt binded to.
She kind of got a pass though. So like the way that she chose Christian to be the last sacrifice was in a way like harm-free. Like she wasn't going to get punished for that because it's her choice. And so...
Yeah. And she's the May Queen, so she has special privileges. She earned that.
Mm-hmm.
I love that she just like looks at Christensen at the end of the movie and it's like, I know what you did. And he's like, yeah, I know what you...
It was terribly hysterical to me that he could not move or answer or say anything in that instance.
Yep.
And then just gets put inside a bearskin and get burned alive.
They just don't even let him
just
talk.
Like shocked. He's just like paralyzed pretty much.
Oh, nuts.
I think he was paralyzed because they had given him something.
Yeah.
They had,
blew something in his face.
Or some sort of like powder into his face. And I think that paralyzed him in turn. Which is kind of merciful, I guess you could say. He didn't really ask for it. He was kind of like dragged into all of this.
I wonder what the bear symbolizes.
He was a beast.
Oh fuck! There you go. That's it.
Yeah.
The beast.
Yeah,
okay.
He was a very carnal beast who gave into his.
He's an
wants.
outsider man who's like tearing apart the commune, the village, the relationships, his own relationship. That's what, like, bears are like a nuisance, so they have to be like burned.
Interesting.
Yeah.
One more thing. What did you guys think about Danny basically being covered in flowers?
It was almost. She looked like a giant slug.
That was a look.
Like it was great. Like I loved her just kind of sitting there, like, you know, just covered in flowers, just kind of chilling there like that in a pile of them.
She's just decorated in flowers.
I don't know why I thought this though. But when she's running, when she's like walking by the house and throwing up in front of the burning building behind her.
It looked like she was dancing.
It looked like she was a big slug to me, kind of. Is that just me? Because she had like, there was even like the antennas coming off the top of it. Like
there was a way that she was kind of walking.
Yeah, and like the dress was bending in a certain way, and I was just like, this is very slug-like looking. I don't know why. It just doesn't. You could put a shell, and it would just be a snail, and you have the spiral, and then we could connect it back to the paganism thing again. But no, they didn't do it. Almost.
What weirded me out about some of the flowers on her dress was that they would like open and close,
like black eyes.
Yeah, to like breathing and stuff.
Like even like in the beginning of the movie, you can see her sister has a black eye from the smog that she ingested when she died.
Oh yeah,
And
I did
so
notice
you see
that.
black eyes, like on the flowers, like even on the villagers as well.
Could this be the evil eye?
Maybe. She also, there's that scene where she like she's having like a dream sequence. She opens up her mouth and all the black smoke comes out of it. And I was just like, oh yeah, that's the exhaust coming out of her mouth.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I didn't even think about that.
Like maybe a part of
Yo.
her died. Like maybe part of her died there as well. Maybe that's like a realization during that dream. Supposing. So much to unpack in this movie. So much.
Like
was
she's
a
like really
lot.
depressed after her family's dead, and it's like months after, and she like barely feels like she is enjoying herself even at a party and stuff. She's just very like mean mugging and just like, I don't want to be here, but then it's just like, can you bring me along anyways? I don't know. I love the transition of Danny's character where she is like concerned sister, and then she kind of is like a crutch to her boyfriend that his friends even tell her get rid of her in a way. But I'm not saying that as a negative. I'm just saying.
Yeah, they kind of had, well, to start with, they kind of had a shitty way of dealing with somebody who had basically like post-traumatic stress from something that had happened and dealing with anxiety and depression. And they just did not give a fuck. They were like, oh, well, like, why don't you dump her? And then I guess after her family dies, he feels like maybe he just can't break up with her and like to make things worse. So he just kind of hangs around even though the relationship wasn't doing too well.
That just made me think of something as sort of the whole idea of collectivist mindset versus individualistic mindset. I think the reason why they were sacrificed is because they couldn't detach from the individualistic mindset. Because if, say, she had gone to a tribesperson and told them about what was happening, I think, as you could see in the movie, they would all share her grief, whereas these people did not share any sort of empathy with her.
Plus, they were all male too.
Yeah.
Guys.
Yeah. I mean, and it's sort of like I feel like Christian as like a boyfriend wasn't like the worst person in the room usually, because he's usually trying to sympathize with her even though they're telling him to dump her.
I think his problem though is that he just didn't stand for anything.
Yeah.
He was always sort of asking other people permission or feeding off of other people.
He wasn't taking action into his own.
Like he wanted to copy his best friend's homework pretty
yep,
much.
exactly. There you go. Yeah, so he's not being his own person really at all. And so that's kind of like an issue, and
that's
so
why he's a beast. He devours things.
Yep.
Pretty much.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So much.
I gotta watch Hereditary.
Was there anything about the film that you did not like?
Kind of like the pacing. This is a movie that really kind of just stretches. Like, sometimes I feel like maybe horror movies work best under 2 hours, but this is a movie that you really need to like take time to like really get invested into. Like, take an afternoon to watch, but like really be in the mood to watch it. But
I think that the pacing is probably my only thing, but then again, sometimes it was very appropriate for it to be a little slower and stretched out. It was kind of its thing. It was definitely not like a quick one and done sort of horror movie. You know, you have to like take some time with it and observe what's going on, and it was a lot of meat to chew through, like I've said now. And I guess the pacing is probably my only part, because I really wish it was maybe a little bit shorter. Like they got into some points a little bit quicker, but at the same time, it wouldn't be as meaty and as in-depth as it is if they didn't give themselves that time and whatnot. So I'm a little conflicted. On how I feel about the pacing, but I agree with Eddie to a point.
I felt like it started off really strongly with its camera work and with the transitions, and then got progressively more boring as the film went on, where they were just using very, very basic shots for most of the rest of the film.
also, the
That makes a lot of sense.
director chose some specific movies like Black Narcissus and Roman Polanski's Hamlet, because he looked at like movies from like the 60s and 70s as reference, and you can definitely see that style of how films were shot and edited back then, and how they were paced and lighted too. Like
He was trying to like emulate that basically.
Yeah, like even how the sun like hits the camera at times.
I was just thinking too, when they get there, so that shot where it starts from behind the car goes above it and then drops down in front of it, but flips the entire thing that you're looking upside down. That is sort of like the last of the really creative shots. And then it stays like that to kind of suggest that they are about to like enter into a world they're completely unfamiliar with. And
it's
then
also
they
probably
enter in there.
like the Twister in the Wizard of Oz story. I'd like to actually see him do Wizard of Oz.
Shit. Now, if we really like went through all the pieces, they're probably all there. Like them entering into the place, dealing with all of the main people, like what's the conflict, finding out about like this person or that person.
Her boyfriend's the Cowardly Lion.
I was just thinking about all the character relations between the two. Like someone who doesn't have a brain, probably the fool.
Yeah.
Who doesn't have a heart, I would probably say the boyfriend.
Yeah, Christian,
Yeah.
probably, yep.
Or maybe he would even be the lion because he doesn't have the nerve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who lacks the
Or
heart?
Josh. He was just there for research.
True,
He didn't even
really
care
have-
after.
yeah.
Like, someone
Yeah.
died.
He wasn't
Yep.
emotionally attached to anything.
No,
he didn't have a
honestly,
heart.
he's like
So
the
no
only one that
hearts.
doesn't really freak out too much when the suicides happen.
Well, the guy says what's going to happen the next day, and he like is excited to go to the event.
Oh,
He knew.
Well, he's very clinical and analytical.
Yeah. No, exactly. Which isn't. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just interesting though, because he has a very so like people in this movie die for very different reasons that are not conventional to horror movies. Except for the Fool. The Fool's the only one that we got killed for sure.
The Fool also reminds me of Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah.
One of the guys is considered the Fool.
Mm-hmm. Except the Fool in Cabin in the Woods is awesome.
And he lives.
and,
And he lives.
and he lives. Yeah. There's or we think that he no.
No,
No,
none
nobody,
of them live.
nobody lives through that one.
The demon gets unleashed and then brings
Yeah.
out its hand and crushes the
The
whole
gods.
cabin. Yeah, the
Yeah.
ancient gods that they were trying to keep down there.
Do we have any other things to say about this movie, or have we kind of exhausted ourselves?
I think we exhausted ourselves.
I'm exhausted.
I'm sure we have more to say about this and stuff. It's been one of those days, I guess, or
One of
weeks.
those days. However, it was super cool to go to see this all together and go see a new movie all together and then get a episode out about a week after.
Yeah. I can't wait to see like more movies in the future that we can talk about. Like some of the trailers that we were watching for like Crawl or Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Those movies. I think this year has been like the strongest out of horror. I think.
Yeah, some very, very cool horror. What are we doing next week, John? We're doing Get Out and Us, aren't we?
I think
Yes.
Jaws or Prana. Or
No, we're going to do Get Out
Yeah.
and Us next week.
Yep.
Is what we're going to do for that.
I
And
was
then
going to be this week, and then we Midsommar.
we did the theater release. And then we're going to do the theater release of It Part 2. And then we may do one for Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Oh, hell, no, we will do one for Scary
Just
Stories.
because we've got a really good episode of that one, and we definitely want to see what the movie translates to.
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to think of what was the other movie that was coming out. There was another horror film coming out. I can't think of it at the moment. But either way, I want to remind everybody that we're super easy to find. We're on all of the streaming services. So we're on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play Music, as well as iHeartRadio and SoundCloud, which is the main place that we're at. We've also got our Instagram and our Facebook. Feel free to interact with us. We love getting more commentary, things you agree with or disagree with.
Yes.
Argue with us on Facebook.
Yes. Debate me.
Right. And we'll go on and answer and bring some more conversation to the podcast. But thank you guys so much for coming to discuss this, watching the movie with me today. It was awesome.
Anytime.
Good night.
Good night. It's night night.